Fellas, I don't know how to say this, but I have herpes. It's highly contagious, and I want to give it to all of you, by force if necessary. In case you are unfamiliar with this condition, herpes is highly ethical repeated pacifism episode syndrome. It causes me to experience high-intensity bouts of pacifism and tranquility. It's very embarrassing. But why am I telling you this? Because Kenshi is one of my favorite games, and it's a fundamentally violent experience. It's a world full of conflict, cannibalism, and unlicensed dentistry. Now, some philosophers would say that to protect oneself from violence, you must become a man of violence. However, I want to prove to you that you can be successful in Kenshi even if you are a giant pussy. To do this, I will adopt one of the most dangerous and traditionally violent occupations in the game, bounty hunting. And that is this week's challenge. Can I track down Kenshi's most notorious criminals and bring them to justice without resorting to any violence whatsoever? Now I know, you're thinking, Reggie, you're obviously just gonna sneak up on them and knock them out, and furthermore, that's fucking lame. No, I'm not going to do that because I'm not a hack. I would never betray my beautiful pacifism in such a way. And in case you think it's weird that I'm wearing a deceased man's face, well, I have 3 words for you. Search engine optimization. You see, thumbnails are very important in YouTube, and multiple studies have shown that having a human face in your thumbnail increases your video's popularity. Unfortunately, my character is a soulless robot, but I think you can see where I'm going with this. By wearing a suit made of human skin, everyone can be happy. I get to be a robot, the algorithm gets its daily supply of human faces, and you get early onset dementia from watching my videos. Now let's get to bounty hunting. I have drafted a list of 3 targets for us to take out. The danger of each bounty ranges from moderate to extreme, so we're going to have to be extra cautious to avoid being disemboweled by the first jaywalker that comes our way. Our first target will be the Preacher. He is a local cult leader that is described as being responsible for the disappearance of hundreds of travelers in the desert region. I was once accused of that myself, so he has my sympathies, but regardless, we have to bring him in alive to receive our $15,000 bounty. Luckily, alive is kind of my specialty. Now the key to pacifism is having a really good athletics stat, because if anyone catches us, we are legally obligated to let them murder us. That's just how pacifism works. So I spent about 5 in-game days training my athletics by bouncing off the walls of this bar like an unmedicated child. Now with an athletics stat of 55, I felt we were prepared to take on the first target. Since we are entirely broke, we will need to be a little creative in how we capture this deranged junkie. We traveled across the map all the way to the Storm Gap coast, where we found the Preacher in his inconspicuously named hideout. The first step was to get his attention. Initially, these guys weren't overly hostile to me, but after I stole everything they own, they quickly reconsidered this position. We couldn't engage the target in direct combat, but that's okay. We just need him to engage us in a high-speed pursuit all the way to Venge. Unfortunately, several of his groupies decided to follow along, but actually I don't give a fuck. They can all get a piece of this pacifism knuckle sandwich. We eventually lost these followers during the chase anyway, because they are a bunch of out-of-shape losers. And after a few hours, it was just us and the Preacher. We finally made it to Venge, but why did we come here in the first place? You see, Venge is known for its beautiful scenery, abundant hospitality, and the occasional bone-melting solar flare. If you get caught in one of these sunbeams, you can take quite a lot of damage. All we need to do is get a little lucky, and maybe a sunbeam hits our target, maybe it melts him into paste, and maybe we can collect his remains in an ice cream scoop and turn him into the authorities. Granted, the sunbeam could also hit us, but you don't get this much herpes by not taking risks. I was hoping that after a few hours of playing Russian roulette with an orbital ion cannon, the Preacher would be dead, but it turns out it's actually quite difficult to intentionally get hit by a solar flare. The best I could get was the tail end of this beam here, and it damaged our target, but it wasn't enough to disable him. I will admit this portion of my plan was a bit of a miscalculation. However, I found out that Venge is also host to a variety of other deadly weather conditions. For example, these black clouds here, I thought they were dust. Turns out it's toxic gas. I tried to suffocate the preacher in this miasma of airborne asbestos, and while it didn't kill him outright, I believe it caused him to develop some form of lung cancer, because his body was slowly being damaged, even hours later. I have to admit, he's surprisingly resilient for a clinically insane farmer, but unfortunately for him, I'm at least twice as unhinged and 3 times as unemployed. Finally, we had a breakthrough when we managed to lead the preacher directly into a high-velocity tornado of sand and broken glass. Even this didn't kill him, but it damaged his limbs so severely that he was physically unable to attack us anymore. You're in my world now, bitch. His body was now rapidly deteriorating from his stage 4 lung cancer, and all he could do was attempt to limp away from us like a wounded animal. I, being the considerate pacifist I am, stalked him through the desert like a Komodo dragon waiting for its prey to succumb to its septic injuries. After a few hours of us following him and screaming in his ears as loud as we could, the preacher could take no more of this psychological torment, and he fainted. He was now unconscious through no fault of my own. In fact, I didn't even touch him. It only took full-body third-degree burns, lung cancer, and sand being blasted into his eyes at 200 miles an hour to take him down. At this point, we could safely and ethically pick him up and deliver him to the authorities for a $15,000 reward. Unfortunately, I forgot to buy first aid kits, so he bled out on our shoulder before we could turn him in. But when you think about it, dead people are incapable of committing acts of violence, so I think we can mark this down as a massive win for pacifism in the long term. Finally, with some money to our name, we could afford to increase the production value of our bounty hunting operation. Specifically, I purchased a hacksaw and a bulk supply of building materials. This will make sense shortly. Our second target will be worth $50,000. His name is Gorillo, and he is the leader of the Gorillo Gang, which is a group of criminals that look like they are trying and failing to survive the atmosphere on Mars. Gorillo himself is described as being inhumanly large and slow of mind. Immediately after seeing his physique, I knew how we could take him out. You see, having a body constructed entirely of spare dumbbells and ham hocks does, in fact, have its downsides. For example, I'm willing to bet he's not a very strong swimmer. But before we can put that to the test, we need to confront him. We made our way to an abandoned prison which he was now living in. I waited until about 3 a.m., at which point I used my hacksaw to cut the locks on his gate. We had now successfully burgled our way onto his property. All we had to do now was get his attention. I made my way up to his throne room without being detected, at which point I stood in the door frame and stared at him silently with a dead look on my face. I was trying to let him know that I came in peace, but I think the human skin I had grafted on my body made that a difficult message to convey. Either way, Gorillo became thoroughly upset with me for breaking into his home, and the chase began. I had him follow me across the desert to our destination in Flats Lagoon. The road trip was largely uneventful. At one point he stopped to turn this skin spider into a perpetual motion machine, but other than that he just made fun of my penis and sexually harassed me. All in all, a fairly standard day. After what felt like an eternity of unrequited sexual aggression, we finally made it to Flats Lagoon. But why did we come here, you may ask? The answer is simple. You see, prior to going to Gorillo's hideout, I had used my building materials to construct a device which I affectionately call the pacifier. It's a house, surrounded by acid, surrounded by 3 layers of walls. Allow me to show you how it works. We begin by swimming into the pacifier all the way to the central house. Gorillo follows us because, as we have previously established, he's not very bright. After closing our series of gates, we are now locked inside the pacifier with Gorillo. I then trap him inside the central house and begin swimming to my freedom. Once I reach the outermost gate, I dismantle it and replace it with another wall. Escape from the pacifier is now impossible. And guess what? That house? It's just been demolished. Gorillo is now slowly dissolving in a vat of acid. I think it's fair to categorize this as an uncomfortable situation, and over time the damage began to pile up. Technically, we are also in the acid, but it has no effect on us because we are morally virtuous and pure of heart. So theoretically, I could just hang out with Gorillo until he died. But I'm no good at small talk, so I decided to turn on sneak mode and go for a smoke break. When I returned, Gorillo was incapacitated, to say the least. I would like to say that this is not my fault. Gorillo clearly succumbed to natural causes, just like the preacher. We swam over, collected his largely dissolved body, and turned it in for a reward of $50,000. Had we tried to actually fight Gorillo, we would almost certainly be dead right now, but thanks to our herpes, we are still alive and well. Now it's time for our final bounty. I decided to really up the difficulty factor here by choosing an opponent that was inherently invulnerable to our previous methods of capture. He is described as being neither man nor animal, and after looking at his profile picture, I'd say that's a fairly charitable description. We will be going after King Gurgler of the Fishman Islands. Sporting no less than 6 tendrilless nipples, he will undoubtedly be our greatest challenge yet. But I've got a foolproof plan. It will just require a little bit of preparation. I'm afraid my lone pacifism won't be enough to defeat a foe this strong. I'm going to need help. So it's time to put together a team. I traveled to Shobatai to recruit Els. He's absolutely fucking huge, but surprisingly quite sneaky. These are both invaluable skills for my plan. Following this, I had Els break into the Tower of Punishment to rescue and recruit Agnew. Agnew's strength stat of 50 will make him a vital asset to our plan. Finally, one quick run across the desert and we were at Hub, where we recruited the world's greatest functional alcoholic, Hobbs. He will be the team's all-rounder and probably the first to die in case anything goes wrong. But let's be honest, I wouldn't let anything bad happen to these guys. My team of highly skilled professionals was now complete, and after some brief training, they were all dangerously pacifistic. I proceeded alone to our target's base. He lived in this abandoned building with his gang of fish people. I snuck into their headquarters and approached the target. As usual, we needed to get his attention, so I called him names and made fun of the fact that he has no appreciable penis anywhere on his body. This pissed him off real good, and he did chase us, but he wouldn't leave his house no matter how much I fucked with him. Clearly, we are dealing with some sort of agoraphobia here. Fortunately, I am a licensed psychologist, and I'm about to prescribe him some radical treatment. By using the Buy Any Building mod, I was able to purchase King Gurgler's house and demolish it. King Gurgler was now a homeless fishman with no penis. He was understandably upset with us about this development, and the chase was on. I led him all the way to the bone fields where my pacifism acolytes were lying in wait in a series of strategically positioned bunkers. By following us to the bone fields, King Gurgler had basically signed his own death certificate because we could now unfurl our master plan. You see, I had located a Leviathan. These creatures are gigantic and potentially very dangerous due to their area of effect stomp attacks. Fortunately, Leviathans are not aggressive by nature. However, they are known to become violent when approached by groups larger than 2 or 3 people. So hypothetically, if I convinced a bunch of fat drunken idiots to approach the Leviathan, and hypothetically if King Gurgler was with them, then hypothetically the area of effect from the Leviathan's attack could be sufficient to incapacitate King Gurgler. The puzzle was now clear to me. All I had to do was assemble the pieces. I deployed my gang of monks from their fallout shelters, and all parties began to triangulate on the Leviathan. Once our team had assembled, I used the taunt mechanic to aggro King Gurgler onto Els. This allowed me to retreat to safety as the rest of my plan unfolded. Els, Agnew, and Hobbs then led King Gurgler directly to the Leviathan. I had the fellas swarm beneath the animal's feet in an attempt to goad it into attacking us. After probably the most stressful first day on the job ever, my recruits succeeded in this plan, resulting in their near immediate deaths. On the upside, the Leviathan also became aggroed onto King Gurgler, and it later incapacitated him. At this point, I picked up King Gurgler's body and began my journey to town to collect my $60,000 reward. Technically, some of my recruits were still alive, but I told them to get lost because there's no way I'm splitting $60,000 with a bunch of limbless freaks. We made our way to Katun, at which point I ripped off King Gurgler's head and sold it to a local mechanic for $60,000. What a day! So in review, we managed to take out 3 criminal masterminds without directly resorting to violence. This is fantastic, but what meaning can be derived from what you have witnessed here today? Let us meditate on this. World-renowned philosopher and black karate man Steven Seagal once asked the following question.
What is the Buddha nature?
Yes. What is the Buddha nature? It's a question we can all ask ourselves, and hopefully after watching this video, we've come closer to an answer. The Buddha nature exists at the apex of pacifism. It is somewhere between planting trees under whose shade we will never sit and dissolving a mentally challenged man in acid. Somewhere in there is the true Buddha nature. I hope you guys liked this challenge. I had a lot of fun making it. If you want to support my channel and help me create more content like this in the future, consider subscribing or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.